As Donald Trump's re-election campaign stirs controversy across the United States, Pentagon officials find themselves revisiting old tensions with a fresh sense of urgency. Having faced a volatile relationship with Trump during his first administration, top military leaders are now contemplating how to respond to his return to the campaign trail with a series of renewed, unfiltered pledges to use the U.S. military in ways many regard as unprecedented and potentially unlawful. Trump's recent public statements, hinting at an aggressive approach to deploying military force within U.S. borders, have sparked serious conversations in military circles about what such actions might mean for the nation, the rule of law, and the constitutional responsibilities of America's armed forces. Even as Pentagon officials navigate these murky waters with extreme caution, it's clear that any attempt to deploy the military domestically in a second Trump term could bring America closer to a constitutional crisis. With high-ranking leaders reportedly preparing for the possibility of orders that may challenge legal limits, the stakes have never been higher. This video delves into the unique challenges faced by military leaders tasked with balancing a commander-in-chief's directives with their oath to uphold the Constitution, examining the ways Trump's influence could reshape the civilian-military relationship in America. Part 1. Trump's prior relationship with the Pentagon and military leadership. From the outset, Trump's approach to the military marked a significant shift from prior administrations. While previous presidents have occasionally clashed with top military officials, Trump's adversarial stance brought unprecedented discord, especially as he pushed military leaders to take steps many regarded as politically motivated or legally questionable. A vivid illustration of this rift came in the summer of 2020, when Trump considered invoking the Insurrection Act to deploy active-duty troops against nationwide protests following the killing of George Floyd. Amid widespread public outcry, then Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, made headlines by publicly apologizing for his presence alongside Trump during a controversial photo op, underscoring the extent to which military leaders were uncomfortable with Trump's vision of law and order. The uneasy relationship continued throughout Trump's presidency, marked by public and private clashes over various military and national security policies. Milley, along with other high-ranking officials, voiced concerns over what they described as Trump's authoritarian tendencies, particularly his inclination to use the military as a political tool. Former Trump aides, including General John Kelly, who served as his chief of staff, have since shared accounts of the president's repeated attempts to circumvent military protocols and wield the armed forces in ways that violated norms. These early experiences left a mark on the Pentagon, with senior officials viewing a potential Trump re-election through the lens of caution and wariness. Many fear a second term could embolden Trump to reattempt measures previously thwarted by the checks and balances within the military hierarchy. Part 2. Pre-election Pentagon discussions and potential domestic orders. Amid growing concern, Pentagon officials have reportedly been engaging in closed-door discussions about possible orders that could arise if Trump wins re-election. According to insiders, these conversations are grounded in a mix of hypothetical scenarios and practical planning, centered on what Trump might ask of the military in a renewed attempt to enforce his domestic policies. The most immediate concern surrounds Trump's openness to deploying troops within U.S. borders, particularly in relation to issues like immigration enforcement and civilian protests. During his first term, Trump explored options to use military forces along the southern border and floated the idea of militarizing the response to protests. Such actions sparked considerable debate among military leaders, with many questioning their legality and necessity. As Trump's rhetoric has grown bolder, legal advisors within the Pentagon are increasingly concerned about how far he might go in demanding the military's involvement in domestic matters. Balancing the duty to follow lawful orders with an obligation to protect constitutional rights presents a dilemma that's rarely encountered to this degree. Military leaders are faced with a complex choice: comply with potentially unlawful directives or face the possibility of dismissal, career consequences, and public backlash. Part 3. Implications of the 2020 Schedule F Executive Order. One of the most significant legal maneuvers Trump has hinted at revisiting is his 2020 executive order known as Schedule F. This order, which was ultimately rescinded by President Biden, would have allowed Trump to convert thousands of federal civil service positions into political appointments. By reclassifying these positions, Trump could theoretically place loyalists throughout the federal government, including in the Department of Defense, making the military more susceptible to political influence. The reinstatement of Schedule F under a second Trump administration would have profound implications for the Pentagon. By replacing career officials with politically aligned appointees, Trump could eliminate many of the institutional checks and balances that currently prevent the military from being used as a tool for partisan purposes. Such a move could potentially reshape the Defense Department into an institution with diminished impartiality, undermining its historical role as a neutral arbiter in domestic matters. Part 4. The Insurrection Act. Trump's potential legal pathway for domestic military use. At the heart of Trump's potential to deploy the military domestically lies the Insurrection Act, a rarely used law that permits the president to use active-duty troops to quell civil unrest. While the Insurrection Act has been invoked on occasion throughout American history, it has traditionally been employed sparingly, with presidents generally respecting the principle that domestic law enforcement falls within the purview of state and local authorities. However, Trump's consideration of the Insurrection Act during the 2020 protests raised serious concerns about how he might use the law in a second term. Legal experts warn that an expansive interpretation of the Insurrection Act could open the door for Trump to use military force in situations that historically would not justify such actions. This could, in effect, grant him sweeping powers to deploy the military in response to political dissent, immigration enforcement, or other issues he deems critical to his administration's agenda. Part 5. Ethical dilemmas and risks facing military personnel. Military personnel take an oath to uphold the Constitution, not to any individual leader. Yet the possibility of being ordered to act in ways that may contravene constitutional values puts service members in a challenging position. Historically, when faced with such ethical quandaries, military leaders have had to weigh the consequences of obeying orders that could lead to legal repercussions or erode public trust in the military. Should Trump issue orders that cross legal boundaries, top officials may find themselves at a crossroads. Some may feel compelled to resign in protest, while others might attempt to navigate a delicate balance between following lawful directives and resisting actions that risk compromising the military's integrity. This potential for mass resignations versus loyalty to the chain of command raises questions about military stability and the long-term impacts on civilian-military relations in the United States. Part 6. The influence of Fox News and far-right media on military personnel. In addition to the institutional challenges facing military leaders, there is a growing concern about the ideological influence of conservative media on the attitudes of military personnel. For years, channels like Fox News have enjoyed considerable popularity among members of the armed forces, with their messaging often aligning with Trump's viewpoints. This trend raises questions about the extent to which military personnel may be ideologically aligned with Trump's policies, potentially affecting their willingness to carry out his orders without questioning their legality or morality. Observers worry that prolonged exposure to media that reinforces Trump's views could create an environment where service members may be more inclined to support directives that align with those views, even if they challenge traditional norms of military conduct. Part 7. Public reaction and the role of civil society. Any attempt by Trump to use the military for domestic enforcement would almost certainly provoke a strong response from civil society, including protests, legal challenges, and public outcry. Civil rights organizations, congressional leaders, and grassroots movements would likely mobilize to resist such actions, invoking legal protections and calling for oversight. Drawing from historical precedents, such as the mass protests and legal battles during the civil rights movement, these groups could serve as powerful deterrents to unchecked executive power. As Pentagon leaders quietly brace for the potential challenges posed by a Trump re-election, their task is nothing short of Herculean. Balancing a commitment to lawful conduct with the responsibilities of military duty requires a delicate approach, particularly when dealing with a president who has demonstrated a willingness to test the boundaries of executive power. The military's role as a safeguard against authoritarianism may be more crucial than ever, with the upcoming election serving as a pivotal moment in America's democratic history.